welcome. Moments away from kicking off.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Cool. That's amazing. You know, it's almost summer. Almost.
It's almost summer. Yeah, I was just discussing earlier with my other half as to whether we should turn the heaters off or not. every time
Oh,
we every time we turn it off, it seems to get really cold, and we need to turn it back on. So I don't want to jinx it again.
I see. No, I here we already hardly get out of air-conditioned areas for
Yeah,
our own, well-being and safety.
no AC here.
Uh, yeah. So today we have a very intense and kind of a lot of topics to discuss. All of them big and interesting. So we will try to split the time and allocate it as well as we can, to kind of cover all of the topics that we wanted to mention. So just like we said in the tweet, we're going to talk about governance a lot. We're going to talk about the ideas, some interesting ideas that we had regarding the high frequency transactions. And we are going to talk about the upcoming hackathon. And also we have some very good questions from the community and some topics that were raised. So yeah, quite a lot of things to talk about.
Absolutely, a lot to cover and some pretty interesting topics too.
Definitely. So one of the things that are kind of very relevant to this whole DAO discussion that we're going to have is this recent hijacking of the Tornado Cash DAO. Did you hear about that?
I heard briefly about it. Uh, if I recall correct, there was like a proposal that was going through, and then it didn't, or something like that. And then the attacker put the same proposal through, but they changed like one of the parameters that meant that they kind of controlled the DAO after it went through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's exactly. It was a very interesting piece of combination like of social engineering
Yeah.
and hacking. So the proposal that was actually malicious was masked as a like proposal that was very similar to the one that previously was voted for it. Like so, basically, people did not realize that they were actually voting for something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And once this malicious proposal was accepted, it allowed the hacker to replace the code of the actual proposal with something else and get most of the governance tokens, and that's basically how they got control over the DAO.
Okay.
And then some of these tokens were sold, and the last I heard about this story was that the hacker actually kind of restored the control back, but I didn't understand whether or what portion of the governance tokens were already sold at this point. So I didn't quite figure out how it ended. But I think that this is like less important. What is important is that, first of all, there is a huge flow in this specific kind of governance, and we're going to talk about several types of governance today. That like when people vote on something that they don't follow closely, and do not, and there is no function that kind of checks for those things. That's when the scary things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of the first thoughts that came to mind when I saw it is like, wow, I voted on a lot of stuff and never like crossed my mind to like check everything really carefully, and obviously needed.
Yeah, that's very that's natural. Like most of people, they kind of hope that somebody else will check or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's when these things happen. But in general, like this is an example of like one of several interesting, I would say, problems that DAOs like need to address, like because there are several kind of types of DAOs that are available today, or several types of governance in general. So I would like to kind of examine it because, as you know, we are trying to move more and more into this DAO governance model, and obviously we're not there yet. And people ask very legitimate questions like, okay, so where exactly are we in this road, right? Like, are we closer to being still kind of centralized and actually governed by whatever Beam Foundation or Beam team, or are we already moving into like more like DAO governance territory and what this means? So I would like to spend at least in the first like large part of this space to discuss all of these various options and where exactly we are in all of these situations.
Yeah.
So before I dive into it, let's first understand like what kind of governance is available at all. Like what can we do in theory? So first of all, we have something like pure on-chain governance. Like for example, you have a contract, smart contract, and there is a certain parameter, let's say interest rate, that you want to change based on the on-chain voting by people who hold the governance token. So this is an example of something which is very structured and limited. So we are talking about this one parameter, and it can only be changed, obviously, within a certain range and probably within certain steps. You can, like, for example, make it higher by like 1 point or lower. And then when the vote is cast on chain, the change is automatic. So there is no manual intervention. So like let's say every week we all vote on whether it should stay the same, go 1 point up or 1 point down. And then whatever the decision is, that's exactly the change that happens in the smart contract. And it's all coded within the smart contract logic. There is no external influence on that at all. And this is something that can be done in most kind of limited cases where you have like very specific decisions to make. For example, when you're talking about like things like interest rate or collateralization ratio or these kinds of parameters, it's very easy to do because it's well-defined parameter. We all know like what's the range of the values is. We all know how it can be changed. And then the question is only like what exactly should be done. Obviously, the problem still remains that who is that person or people who are voting and how exactly like their decision is made in terms of maybe there is one large holder of the governance tokens that basically can influence all of these decisions. But still, at least in terms of the process, it's very clear and it's automated, it's programmed, so everybody understands what exactly is going to happen. Unfortunately, this approach cannot work in all cases. So let me give you an example. Let's say we want to do the same for deployment of a new application on Beam Chain. So for example, let's say somebody deploys an application and then the DAO can vote whether this application should be activated or not, right? For example.
Yep.
So it seems like a good approach in some cases, but the problem is that in order to make this work, somebody needs to develop this application, test it, audit it, deploy it, only then to discover that the DAO voted against it, for example. And then obviously it's a problem because it's a huge investment of time and effort just to, basically discover that nobody wants it. And in this case, obviously, there probably is going to be a preliminary discussion, and only if there is a kind of off-chain informal consensus that yes, it's a good application and it should be built, then and only then somebody builds it. And then there is a vote to make it formally also approved. But the kind of intent behind it is already known in advance. And this is what we're trying to do with the forum or some of the decisions that were voted on chain. We're trying to first gather the feedback from the community and from everyone to kind of understand what's going on. And then the vote itself is more like a formal component to make this official.
Okay.
Now, in some cases, there are things that need to be done by a person. For example, to deploy a contract in the first place, you cannot do it on chain because the contract is not on chain yet. So somebody needs to actually deploy it. Or if there is a hard fork, somebody needs to code it and test it and actually perform it. So you have this person or group of people who actually need to have, let's say, higher level access to the blockchain, to the, build system, to whatever. Of course, after they do their work, there is, it's responsibility of all miners, let's say, to upgrade their systems. And if they feel that this specific change is bad or like in some way detrimental to the ecosystem, they might not do it. And this is why, in some cases in the past, there were adversary hard forks or forks that created like two separate coins instead of one, because the consensus change was not accepted by all the miners and there was a split. So yeah, these things also can happen, but still it requires a lot of manual labor and manual work to go into this, right? Okay, so in case of Beam, one of the things that like we tried to do from the very beginning, even when it was a formal company, and then when it was like Beam Foundation, we tried to create a maximal alignment of incentives. So that was our approach back in the day, and in fact, like it's mostly what's going on right now. We're trying to create an alignment of incentives where all of the participants are aligned on some key, let's say, values, and also are incentivized like in the same kind of range of values. So, for example, let's start with like non-monetary alignment, right? So everybody agrees that Beam is first and foremost privacy coin and solution for privacy and confidentiality. So it's very hard to imagine today any kind of change passing through that will make, let's say, Beam non-private, right? That's almost impossible to think about.
Yeah.
So the reason for that is because everybody who is in Beam right now, whether it's the team, whether it's the community, they're all here because of this kind of key reason. And this is the informal kind of consensus between all of us that we like privacy, we want privacy, and we're here to provide the best possible kind of privacy-related solutions. However, inside this, obviously, there are a lot of additional kind of decisions that are made. Some of them are very technical. Some of them are more of a economic and kind of tokenomics related subjects. And once again, these decisions, if we are all have the same interest, and let's say we are all Beam holders, so obviously we are interested in Beam going up in value, and now many of us are also BeamX holders, so we are also like kind of understand why we hold BeamX and what's the reason for that and why we're doing this. And this is what makes this kind of alignment of incentive important in decision making, right? So obviously there is an additional aspect that, yeah, like theoretically somebody can do something that other people cannot. For example, create something malicious or do something like wrong. But the question is, what would be his motivation? And what we have always tried to do is to minimize the situation where like one person or a small group of people can hugely benefit from it, right? So far, for the last 5 years, we managed to avoid this kind of, there were no like rug pulls on Beam or any other kind of behavior, because eventually everybody were interested in kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's, ultimate protection from anything, but that was the approach. So when we are talking about right now, yes, still there is a lot of control on the Beam team side in terms of actual implementation of things, because that's the people who are actually doing things on Beam today. However, it's almost unthinkable that important decisions would be done like unilaterally or against the will of the community, because then what would happen is that this misalignment of kind of approaches would basically leave Beam or without the community, or like hurt the reputation, which is very important. So if you ask yourself like what drives me, what drives like other people, it's this, right? So like nobody wants to do something that will be completely unacceptable by the current community. And this is how it's all actually working, despite the fact that, yes, theoretically somebody can do something adversarial, but in practice, the incentive to do that is very low. That's kind of the the explanation.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it would like although there may be certain parts that could be more decentralized. I mean, everyone is aligned in their like direction towards creating the privacy tools, and we've seen that coming to fruition, especially lately with the dApps and all that as well.
For sure. So first of all, there are some kind of basic principles that are required in order to make this work. Everything has to be open source.
Yeah.
So it's not like trust me, bro.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fine. Like we do like everything that we are doing is made open source like immediately, and it's an important part of this contract that we all have, kind of, in terms of like, I think the first kind of 6 months that we were closed source 5 years ago, that was like the last time that we did something that was not published immediately, except for some small things like the old website. I think it's not open source yet, but it's really meaningless now. And that's one thing. The second part is obviously everything that is related to large movements of DAO funds, whether it's like BMX, is also agreed upon. And one of the questions that were asked, and something that we did screw up, is the allocation for BMX for the pool, like Beam Nifrit pool.
Yeah. All of it went to the BMX pool.
Yes.
And it was meant to be between that pool, the Beam Nefrit, and BMX Nefrit as well.
Yeah, so there was in the announcement and in the documentation, there was a split of the 6% that was allocated between two pools. The Beam BMX pool should have gotten 4%, and Beam Nifrit pool should have gotten an additional 2%, and the total was 6. However, due to our mistake, all of the 6% actually went to the Beam BMX pool. So now we need to make a decision of how to correct the situation, and whether like to allocate additional BMX for this Beam Nifrit pool, or change the existing allocation. And obviously, technically, it's simpler to allocate new BMX tokens, but we need to talk this over and make the decision.
Yeah.
And it's an important one. So another decision that is, I think, very kind of important, and somebody like, I don't exactly know who it was who talked about it, but basically incentivizing the liquidity from providing liquidity from Ethereum through bridges.
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, so if you are moving liquidity from Ethereum onto Beam through bridges, you could be incentivized with kind of additional BMX allocation as an idea.
True.
So this is something that we need to formally kind of discuss and decide whether it's a good idea or not, and then I think vote on it and make it happen.
Yeah. This would be cool, and could also like maybe even if it wasn't just for like bridging over, but bridging over and like providing liquidity and this kind of stuff would be very cool.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Bridging the tokens and then providing liquidity, obviously, yes, into either DEX or like any other application. So in terms of, like, for example, Nifrit specifically is a very good example of like almost perfect in terms of the DAO, of the governance, application, because it does not have any governance, right?
Yeah.
So it's just there, and if it's working, it's working. You don't need to make any decisions. You don't need to, like, there's no externally available parameters that you could play with or screw up. Unfortunately, not all of the contracts can be made this way. And also there are, like specifically in the free, there are external oracles that are involved, which is also always a problem, anywhere, because an oracle is always centralized. It has huge influence on the behavior of the protocol. So right now, the protection mechanism that's in the free is basically that if the oracle is screwed up, the contract will just stop changing, right? You will just be able to withdraw your assets as is, and it will not continue operating under like this like oracles that do not work properly. But once again, like if you have any type of oracle in your system, it's always a weakness point, as we saw multiple times.
Yeah.
In many contracts that we have deployed, like Dex included, they do have an ability to upgrade like through, so there is a kind of admin account, but the only thing that this admin can do is to upgrade the contract. And the upgrade of the contract is not immediate. It always has a period of time, which is specified when the contract is actually launched. And by the way, this is also one of the important things that are currently missing and are lagging, but are very behind, like what we need to have is how all of this information is exposed. Because right now, like for example, some of these parameters are not simple to find or to view through the existing Explorer, and we need to work on that. Vladi is doing a lot of work on that both from the backend side, and also he provided some kind of workaround or like solutions to kind of see what's happening right now. But we do need, and we're working on the upgrade to the official Explorer to show all of these important information, how much value is locked in the contract, what is upgrade policy, etc. So the upgrade is always delayed by at least 1 week. So when, for example, the new version is deployed, there is an activation height for this version, which is always at least 1 week away from the current block height. The reason for that is that if this new update is either malicious or involves some kind of decisions that are not accepted by everyone, people have time to react and to either withdraw the liquidity or make any other decisions. So there is no such a thing like an immediate upgrade of the contract and then just something new is happening. The reason we still keep these contracts with this option at all is just because we're scared of some bug that we will need to fix. It's a problem. Right? It's kind of a trade-off between like if we could deploy contracts that are completely immutable, but then if something happens, we also have absolutely no ability to fix it. So eventually the idea is that once the contracts are mature enough and we understand that they're working and no bugs were found, we will close the upgrade completely, and then they will become basically just like Nifrit, completely governance and autonomous.
Okay, nice. So although the contracts at the moment are upgradable with the 1 week roughly kind of wait period, they do have the ability to become like immutable and set in stone kind of thing.
Yeah, basically, the last upgrade will just close this function.
Okay, yeah.
Once again, like in the perfect world, which we're not there yet, but that's where we should go, it works like everybody gets an automatic notification that certain contract is about to be upgraded, either via a bot, which we don't have and probably should have. And then what is happening is that the code for the upgrade should be obviously available. And then there should be a very good way, which by the way, right now is not the case, and I'll explain why in a second, to verify that the deployed code is actually exactly the same code as was advertised. Otherwise, it's meaningless.
Okay, yeah.
So the reason it's not simple to do is just because of the tool chain. So we need to create a generalized kind of standardized tool chain, which means like if you don't build the code with exactly the same version of the compiler and all of the other tools, then the result might be different. So in order to avoid that, you need to fix all of the tools that you use in order to build the contract and only use this specific version. So that's like one additional task that needs to be done, and obviously it should be verifiable and predictable build, right? So every time anyone builds the same code, they will eventually get the same binary result. So yeah, that's also a part of it all. Regarding the auditing, for example, so auditing was considered for a long time one of the kind of key components of each deployment of each major protocol. But for the last, I don't know, couple of years, we saw time and time again audited contracts doing all kinds of weird things, of being hacked, being rug pulled, whatever. So these audits, in my opinion, could not be relied. Like you cannot say, oh, that was audited by Chertik or whatever, like, and that's fine, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is that we have audited our code several times in Beam. First of all, obviously before the launch in 2019, we have audited it with 3 different companies, and it was very expensive. And the truth is that the results were, so once again, I don't want to say anything bad about these people because they're all honest and very kind of hardworking and knowledgeable people, but it is very, very difficult to audit, especially if it's new technology and new code. Yeah, like if you have audited 1,000 Solidity contracts, then the next one could be I think even ChatGPT can audit contracts today. But if it's new, completely new blockchain, if it's like new and different code, custom implemented, it's very difficult to audit it. So I do not blame these people for missing things that were later discovered during the operation, because it was almost impossible to find it. On the other hand, like it's a big question, right? Because these audits are crazy expensive.
Yeah.
And it's a big question, like how much value do they exactly bring, and what are the alternatives, right? So let's say, I don't know, tomorrow we want to deploy some, governance upgrade, right? Like, is it safe? Is it not safe? Who's to tell, right? How should it work? It's all questions for like that don't have any deterministic answers today. Like it all needs to be decided by all of us on a case by case basis, right? So it's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for example, like let's take, like, in my opinion, an example of well-governed project like Monero, right? I think Monero is very well governed.
Yeah.
However, the trade-off that they have taken is less, in my opinion, less development, less innovation, like in terms of like the tempo of change. Like it's always this balance that you can leave something working for a long time and touch it as little as possible, which is nice, but then you miss on some possible innovations. However, you're not risking, upsetting something that's been working for a long time. Bitcoin obviously is on this kind of extreme. They added the taproot or whatever that was, and now like there are ordinals and all of these other strange things all of a sudden, and some people are, let's say, less than thrilled about that. So in my opinion, like Monero did it really well. On the other hand, for example, as a kind of, in my opinion, really mismanaged project is Green. Because Green, okay, so they had their issues and they lost their leader. At some point, he disappeared, and like I don't know exactly what it was, but they actually have a lot of funds. Like they have been donated. Probably you remember these old Bitcoins. There was a big story about it.
Yeah.
And today they have actually crazy amounts of money, like in our Beam, broadcast terms. However, they are not disposing these funds. They're not using these funds well. They have very few developers doing mostly maintenance, very little innovation, very little activity, even though they do have funds just sitting there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like the opposite of what we did in Beam. So we used all of the funds that we could get from investors or any other means, and tried to maximize them in terms of the development efforts, which is why like Beam had relatively large team back in the day when everybody was kind of on the payroll and it was full-time work for everyone. So at the same time, we did manage to create a lot of different additional things and bring Beam technologically where it is today with smart contracts and the DeFi ecosystem. Like it was all part of this effort. So yeah, like this is kind of the alternatives. Now, back to the original and kind of to summarize this discussion, what I see happening in the near future. So first of all, everything that we can effectively, make pure on-chain and decentralized, we will. Whether it's any parameterized smart contracts or any other kind of decision making that could be made to a pure on-chain vote, I think we should do it. In terms of BMX allocation, and in a second I will address another question about dumping BMX that happened after it was launched on DEX. But in terms of BMX allocation, the idea behind the overall kind of pie that we presented when we had launched the BMX DAO and how it should be allocated eventually is that the majority of BMX should go to the community. Like if we take whatever, like team investors, doesn't matter. The majority of BMX should be allocated to the community. But how it is allocated in terms of the timeline, that was never discussed. And then we did some kind of ad hoc steps along this way, which I'm not sure are perfect, but that's what we did until right now. So first of all, we have provided this kind of risk-free liquidity mining for people who are locking Beam, and there was about like 1%, which is like 1 million BMX was distributed during about 3 months after the BMX DAO launch. The idea behind it was that in order to get these BMX, people need to lock Beam in the contract. And it means taking this Beam out of centralized exchanges, locking it for this period of time, obviously installing the wallet, participating, launching the application. So the idea behind giving away 1 million of free BMX was that it will kind of bring people to experience Beam, ecosystem and Beam wallets and see how it works. And it's not just something that you do by sitting on a centralized exchange and just clicking here and there and don't even know what the project that you're buying does. So that was the idea. And in my opinion, at least some of the people who dumped BMX immediately after the BMX was launched on DEX it's like people who just kind of got it for free. So they didn't have anything to lose. It was kind of free money. Yeah. So that's my opinion. Like as far as I know, most of the team is definitely not selling BMX, and personally, like I think it's I can say if it's a good investment or not, but it does have a purpose that is moving we're moving towards to like use it as a governance token for the ecosystem. So that's like what is happening. I also don't think that investors that invested like in BMX back in the day when there was around, they're selling because they would be selling at a huge loss. I don't think they're doing that. But obviously, confidential cryptocurrency, you cannot be sure who's doing what. Thankfully.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like there will be people that sell, there will be people that buy, and this is the way it goes. I think what's more important is like the developments that are happening, like BeamX being the governance token for Nefrit, I think is very cool. And I mean, there's no governance in Nefrit, so that's maybe not the right way to put it, but like the DAO itself will be in control of the DEX and control of the asset minter and control of Nefrit and all of the fees and generated Beam or whatever the fees are in. This will be going to the DAO and to be controlled by BMX holders, which I think is far more important and far more interesting than.
Yes, so that's exactly the point. So all of the revenues that are generated by all of these applications eventually like go to only one place, which is the DAO vault.
Yeah.
And it's actually working. So each transaction that is done on either the Free or Dex, you can see you can see, and this is one of the points that I'm coming to, the transparency part. But once we do have the transparency that we need, which is definitely, I think, one of the biggest problems right now. Like people don't exactly know what's going on. So you can see some of the parameters inside each application, but there is no clear dashboard that shows, okay, this is what's going on with each contract. And we don't have too many for now. So it's like, I don't know. There's several key contracts that you need to know about and understand what's going on with them. When they are upgraded, there should be a bot that notifies you when anything like out of the ordinary happens. Obviously, everybody should know about it. The total value log should be exposed, and also the revenues that are generated from the transaction on these contracts and that go to the DAO vault should be very visible and clear. And that's like point number one. Point number two is we do need to take better care of the kind of day-to-day, working with proposals on the forum, which sometimes gets forgotten or neglected for long periods of time. And I just want to say this: please do remind us and nag us as like, and me personally as as much as you can without kind of interfering with your regular life. But if you see that you posted something and nobody looked at it for 2 days, please just send me DM on Telegram and say, Alex, take a look at this, because that's what happens. Everybody's busy, everybody is doing a lot of things get missed. That's not how it should be. It's not intentional. It's not because nobody cares. It's because everybody is very preoccupied with all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So we do see that whenever there is active nagging on any subject, we do respond. Whether it's the blockchain size or any other topic. Eventually, the answers are getting there. So yeah, it's working. Nagging works. Please do more of it. That's kind of in terms of the forum and what's going on there. Yeah, so we are still in the process of kind of figuring out how it should work and how it should work better. A lot of things right now are not there in many different areas. Yeah, so that's a lot of work is still ahead of us in how this should eventually kind of work as a DAO.
Absolutely, and I think like we're on the right trajectory and path forward towards improving it and making it more of a flywheel kind of set up for the DAO itself as well. And be
Yeah, I agree that we are moving forward. Maybe not as fast as we all would want to, but we have good intentions and we have great people. Yeah, like eventually we will get there. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, yeah, like I could probably talk more about this topic, and probably I should, but let's move to the next one because the time is running out. But we should get back to that and discuss this in more detail. So the second topic I would like to kind of talk about is the idea that we had with high frequency transactions. So the high frequency transactions is this mechanism that we use both in DEX and different applications. And the way they work is whenever the transaction is sent into the mempool, instead of just being added to the long list of transactions waiting to be mined, like it is in most other cryptocurrencies, the transaction is actually added in this kind of a tree when the transaction says, okay, I'm going to be after this transaction, right? And it points on a specific transaction, and this creates a well-ordered and defined sequence.
Yeah.
Now, whenever a new transaction comes, it can basically say, no, I don't want to be after the last one. I want to be after the first one or before the first one. However, it also needs to provide enough fees for the miner to compensate for all of the transactions in the branch that it is replacing. Because eventually what the miner does, it selects the most profitable branch to mine. And the most profitable branch for the miner is the one that has the most fees. So you have this kind of micro blockchain, right, sort of inside of it, made of transactions. There are several kind of very important benefits to this approach. So the first benefit is that when you are deciding what to do, in terms of, for example, sending a transaction to the DEX and like understanding what's the current price or what is going to happen with your transaction, you can rely on this longest branch that you currently have, and you can make some decisions before the block is mined. Because on Beam, as you know, the block is mined 1 minute on average, but in practice it could be 6 minutes, it could be 5 minutes, and sometimes it's relatively long periods of time, and things can kind of change. So the application can make a decision of what exactly to do when it sees that it sent a transaction, but the situation had changed, and now there is a different transaction standing kind of in line before it, which changes the price. So right now, all of these decisions are completely automated and behind the scenes. So there is a fixed slippage, there is a fixed behavior on what to do. Basically, what happens is that if I see that I can no longer be where I want it, I just kind of jump, the transaction jumps to the end of the queue and adjusts itself. If the change is too much, like for example, the slippage is fixed to 1%. So if we are beyond that limit, the transaction just cancels. And that's why you see failed transactions in DEX sometimes. So the idea is to take this mechanism to the next level and use it to create a smoother trading experience. So for example, when you are trading on DEX and you're doing a trade, you will see the result of your trade immediately as you send the transaction, even though it wasn't mined yet. So basically, it's a little bit similar to what's happening in today's Ethereum, where you have two stages. You have the kind of transaction completed and then transaction finalized when it was actually finalized by the validators. In our case, the completed means that the transaction was accepted into the mempool, and now it's ordered in a specific branch. And finalized, it's when it was actually mined. Now, obviously, there could be rollbacks because sometimes your transaction could be just canceled by another transaction that kind of changes the state of this mempool tree. And then what's happening, you need to get a notification in the UI, and then you can make a decision of what to do. It can be automated if you select some defaults, or you can make a decision, actually yourself in real time. Basically, to either increase the fee. So let's say you want to be number 2 in the list, and then somebody says, no, I'm going to be number 2 and I pay more. And you say, no, I want to pay even more, and then I'll be number 2 again, something like that.
Yeah.
Or you can, change some additional parameters of the transaction with the knowledge of what exactly changed, right? So the actual challenge here is not just to make it work, in the wallet, but also, and most importantly, to properly present it in the UI, so that you understand what's happening and that you can make the decision what to do.
This makes sense, and actually, I was using something the other day that worked a little bit like this. It was on Ethereum, and I think it was like an NFT thing or something like that. But the thing I thought was very cool was that it had like it was selling NFTs or a place to buy NFTs, and it would tell you if there was already a pending transaction, like in the mempool or something like this. Like someone was already trying to buy it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
Yeah, and like when I saw that, I thought, wow, what a amazing, like very simple idea, but what an amazing feature.
Yeah. So the point is that like it actually depends on how often it will happen that the pool is rearranged. I think that in regular case it will be relatively rare. But once again, once it happens, you will need to be able to understand what happened, because you just made the trade and then it was canceled. Now it can happen anyway, because theoretically there are rollbacks, but people who trade mostly on Ethereum, they don't experience rollbacks anymore. And even when it was proof of work, it was very rare, almost like never happened. But still, in this case, it's a possibility and it needs to be properly presented. By the way, the other interesting benefit of this approach is that there can no longer be front running and sandwiching MEV, right? Because yes, you can back run, but you cannot front run. If I'm saying I want my transaction after this one, nobody can come in between, right? If they do, my transaction will be just canceled.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so I know it's like not a huge topic on Beam right now, but it is a huge topic in general on decentralized exchanges everywhere, where there
Yeah.
is a lot of action and liquidity. Then people are getting front run and sandwich all the time, and they lose a lot of money as a result. And the MEV is actually one of the huge topics being discussed, this in the Ethereum community and Polygon and several others.
Yeah, it's
Um,
a very interesting like space as well.
Yeah, it's an exciting space. Maybe one day, like we will talk about it, but in general, right? Not specifically about related to Beam, but it's a fascinating topic to investigate. Um, so yeah, like you get these two benefits. You get kind of immediate response to your transaction, like what happened, and you get the new state is reflected immediately in the UI, and also you have this benefit of nobody being able to front run you anymore. So I think it's very nice use of this high frequency transaction feature.
Absolutely, and like I want to say very nice for new people like coming into the Beam ecosystem, because this is one thing that always comes to mind. I mean, I personally have been like a victim of getting sandwiched or whatever. I remember, I think it was Nansen, the like analytics tool. I looked at my account on there, and it had like a tag on my wallet of like sandwich victim. Uh, but anyway, what I wanted to say is like a lot of new people I see coming in buying coins on dexes and this kind of thing, and they just get obliterated by these mev bots because they're not familiar enough to avoid it. And like for people coming into the Beam ecosystem, if they by default were able to avoid it, that would be a huge win for Beam.
Yeah. So it's first it works like that today, right? So it's by default, but the difference is that it just you know in your experience when you are trading using today's DEX is still much slower, and it's correlated with the speed of the kind of blockchain, adding new blocks, right? So your experience is still just like you would send a regular transaction. You see it pending, pending, pending. Okay, completed. So that's like your experience, and you understand that there was a new block. If we build this new kind of high frequency transaction based UX, it will be like instant, right? It will feel like everything is happening immediately, and only the kind of settlement, the eventual settlement on when the new block is mined, will just move your transaction from completed to verified or confirmed, and that's it, right? But the experience will be much smoother. We're currently building a small proof of concept on that, and once it's ready, we will obviously show it on like on DAppNet or any other testing network, and we will see how it works. So yeah, that's one of the things that's we're working on.
Very cool.
Yeah. Okay, so another topic that I would like to talk about before we run out of time is the hackathon.
Ah,
So yeah, you probably saw the tweet with the announcement, and I would like to just provide a little bit more details about what's going to happen. And tomorrow, I promise, I say it to Amir because I promised him to do it today and yesterday and the day before, but I will finally complete the article about the exact kind of stages of the hackathon and what's going to happen. But I will take this opportunity to, talk about it because I'm really excited about this. So the idea is to have a hackathon which will focus on the front end part of the application. So the last hackathon we had involved writing contracts. It was very difficult. Nobody managed to do it, and nobody, like I think, like no one. And now we want to make it different, and we do want to have a lot of successful projects as the result. So it's going to be divided into few stages. At first, we will try to promote this as much as possible to collect applications. all you need to do to participate is just basic knowledge of any web development platform, React, Vue, Angular, pure JavaScript, doesn't matter. Because what you will be doing is basically integrating with our wallet component, which is WebAssembly. This is how all of the current applications work. So we can look at examples. We will provide a well-documented and organized, better than today kind of framework to get started. And then you can create a new application. However, there is always a question, okay, so what does my application work against on the blockchain? Like you still need some kind of smart contract to make a proper Web3 application. And for that, we have several proposals. The first one is to use any of the existing contracts. So you can create a mashup between Dex and Bonds or Bonds and Gallery or whatever. So you can use any of the existing contracts to interact with. You can also, we're going to provide some generic contracts that allow you to store data, get data, some basic functions on the blockchain. So you can do some simple operations. The third and one of the most exciting things that we want to announce is the ability to create simple contracts in Solidity on first version of EVM integrated into Beam.
Nice. This is cool.
Yeah. So by the time of the hackathon, we will provide a separate blockchain that will be it will include a new version that will allow to write relatively simple Solidity contracts. So it's not going to be a full-featured kind of completely Ethereum compatible EVM, but it will allow anyone who knows Solidity to write some kind of simple things and work against them with our DApp infrastructure. And I think it's going to be huge, both for attracting developers and showcasing our kind of EVM integration and gathering feedback and finding bugs. So I think it's going to be a big step towards the next hard fork, which will, I hope, at some point completely integrate EVM into Beam alongside existing virtual machines. So we'll be able to choose how you want to develop smart contracts. And the last possibility is that if somebody submits an idea that good that we all say, oh, it's an amazing thing, then we will be able to just write a custom smart contract for this specific project. Obviously not a production level, but for good enough for the hackathon, and then allow this team to build the solution on top of it. So that's kind of the options. Obviously, once we collect some applications, we will do some seminars, explain how things work, do some coding sessions, kind of show how to use these different tools and how to work with the Beam wallets and everything, and obviously provide support for everyone who wants to participate. We should decide on the prize pool and where to get it. So this is like additional thing, and then once all of these stages are complete, we will set a date, or maybe initially we will set a date, and we will make it like something like 24 hours. Not necessarily, everybody needs to be online all the time, but 24-hour period to kind of create and submit something. And if somebody says, I don't have any ideas, but I do want to participate, we will provide some standard kind of ideas to implement for the hackathon. I think it will be really fun and kind of huge, opportunity to get some developers, to join and look at what we have in terms of, various tools and integrations. Yeah, so that's something in the works, and once again, I will publish the article like tomorrow, I promise, and then we will kind of start talking about specific steps to take in this direction.
Very cool. And I think that this presents a far better opportunity than the previous hackathon. I mean, we have a lot more example contracts, as you mentioned, the initial EVM compatibility will be there to test out and play around with, and the focus on the front end application side makes a lot of sense as well. And it will be cool to see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
Do we know roughly when it will be taking place?
So I was thinking something towards the end of June. like in about a month. But once we detail all the steps, and we will see if it's feasible, or maybe we should make it a little bit later. But yeah, like I think something around that time would be close to reality, like maybe a bit later. So yeah, before we move on, there are two questions I just want to briefly address because I think they're important and I just want to touch them. So first of all, there's a very good question, like what's the main focus of Beam now that we have Dex and Nifrit and they're all online and and working. And when we say goals, like not about the next releases, which will be the web wallet and the mobile wallet and the desktop wallet and all of this, but how like more kind of general goals. What are they? Um, it's a great question. I'm not going to give a full answer now because it's probably a good topic for another time, and also I think it's better to do it in writing in general. But I would outline three things. First of all, liquidity. Like obviously, liquidity and users is almost the same thing. Like more awareness, more people trying, joining. And by the way, this is something that another question mentions is how to provide more utility for BMX, like something more things to do with BMX, and also definitely like not just BMX, but in general more things to do on Beam, which can be engaging for newcomers, whether it's incentives for bringing liquidity from other chains or whatever. But it's definitely something that we need to continue thinking about and doing. And back to the goals. So the first one, more liquidity and more users. The second one is we need to close the gaps in transparency, as I said, which is very important, the DAO governance and organization, so that we make it very clear, right, to everyone who is joining what exactly is going on. I think that the recent kind of website upgrade is a good step in this direction. However, as you probably noticed, some of the documentation is not working still. It still requires, migrating and updating and organizing. So we need to do that. We need to finally kind of close the issues with the blockchain explorer to make it show all of the existing contracts. And once again, like when the web wallet will be out, it will make it easier for new people to see the applications without downloading anything. So this is kind of the second part, to close these gaps for the technical debt that we have in terms of making our DeFi ecosystem stand out. And the third goal, I would say, is to look for kind of for lack of better word, like market fit in terms of what we can offer that nobody else has. Like technologically, we do have a lot, but from the product perspective, I think we can do more and look for opportunities to integrate with other projects. Recently, for example, I read that NIM did a kind of integration with the lib-P2P, which is the library that we use on the networking level. So integrating with NIM is one option. Again, many other kind of ideas that we have to increase the prominence and awareness and the usability eventually of Beam. So yeah, like that I would say are the three main goals. But once again, I will write it down and let's discuss it in more detail because it's easy to talk, but eventually we do need specific things to discuss and to do.
Absolutely, and this would actually be like a great discussion to have on the forum and get a lot of the community kind of aligned with the goals and how to achieve them and this kind of thing, which has already been taking place as well, which has been great to see.
Yeah. So the last question I just want to mention is about the progress with centralized exchange listings. I'm not aware of any, honestly. Like maybe I don't know everything, but from what I know, I don't think anyone is going to list Beam in the near future. No, like definitely not Binance.
Yeah.
But by the way, speaking of Binance relisting, I don't know if it's still the case, but in most cases, I think they require KYC of the team and security deposits. I don't know how it works with Pepe, for example, but
Yeah, I think they have a lot of requirements, but then if you have a lot of volume, they kind of throw them out the door, so to speak. This is me just guessing. I have no.
Yeah, but like I mean, you know, if the project is popular enough, maybe they will list it anyway. But
Mm,
I think like they didn't require any KYC from Bitcoin, obviously, right, or Ethereum, but still.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so this covers mo like all of these things that we had in the list. It was a long list.
Yeah, a lot to cover and some really interesting points brought up as well.
Yeah. So just to kind of reiterate one important point again, if you feel that you don't get the answers, if you feel that your proposals are not read or anything like you're neglected, please do not hesitate to bring this up again and again, and like make us aware. And yeah, like we do want to provide answers, and like it's not like usually we're not avoiding subjects. There are some exceptions, but usually we don't. Yeah, so please do not give up on us. Keep bringing this up, and it's very important. Yeah, and uh, like in the coming days, there will be a lot of updates and news about like the hackathon thing and the releases that are coming. I hope very soon. So yeah, like stay tuned, stay with us, and we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Alex, thank you again. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.